Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer. If you're a Year 9 history student studying the causes of the French Revolution, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're going to look at history not just as, a bunch of boring dates to memorize, but as a thrilling system versus hackers story. Just imagine an ancient, massive computer system that literally controls millions of people. And then suddenly, a group of brilliant, incredibly dangerous thinkers arrive to hack the code and bring the whole thing crashing down. Now, these thinkers didn't use swords, they used ideas. And as we'll see, those ideas became the ultimate weapons.
Here is a quick roadmap of the exact 6 steps we're using today. 1. The ultimate power trip. 2. Lighting the intellectual fuse. 3. Rousseau, power to the people. 4. Diderot, the skeptical rebel. 5. Paine, mocking the elite. And finally, 6. The mindset for revolution. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The ultimate power trip. Pre-1700s Europe.
To truly understand why these thinkers were considered so unbelievably dangerous, we first have to understand the old operating system of the time. This system was controlled entirely by the monarchy and the Catholic Church. Under it, the king wasn't just some politician, he ruled by a concept called divine right. Basically, this was the profound belief that his authority to rule came directly from God. So the crucial point is that this concept acted as the ultimate mind-control tool. If the king made a law, ordinary people obeyed it, because going against the king meant you were literally going against God. It was a flawless way to enforce absolute, unshakable obedience from the peasantry, completely trapping them in their social class.
And that brings us to the system of government itself, the absolute monarchy. This is a political system where the king, and in the case of France, we're talking about King Louis XVI, holds total, completely unrestricted control over the country and everyone in it. There was no parliament to keep his decisions in check, absolutely no voting, and zero democratic debate. Under this incredibly rigid top-down system, complaining about high taxes, starvation, or unfair laws, that was essentially impossible. The king's power was viewed as totally untouchable, just a massive fortress of authority that seemed impossible to breach.
Section 2. Lighting the intellectual fuse, the Enlightenment.
But here's the thing about systems. No system is perfectly secure. In the 18th century, a virus swept across Europe, meant to completely crash the king's system. This was a movement called the Enlightenment. Look closely at the massive contrast in mindsets here. The pre-1700s mindset relied completely on old habits, long-standing tradition, a whole lot of religious fear and superstition. You just accepted things because, well, that's the way it's always been. But the 18th century Enlightenment, it brought a radically new approach to the world. Philosophers started arguing that society should be transformed using logic, which meant thinking clearly and systematically. They demanded reason, which basically meant finding solid evidence to prove if something actually made sense. And they championed science, meaning physically testing ideas rather than just blindly believing them. Replacing all that old superstition with logic and science wasn't just some neat academic exercise happening in a quiet library. It was a direct, deadly threat to the very foundation of the absolute monarchy.
Section 3. Rousseau, power to the people. Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
So let's meet our first intellectual hacker, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He championed equality and totally attacked a core concept of the old system called sovereignty. Now, sovereignty simply means ultimate power or the right to rule over a territory. Under the old operating system, sovereignty belonged exclusively and permanently to the king. But Rousseau completely flipped the script. He argued that a king actually had no natural right to hold all this power. Instead, he claimed that sovereignty rightfully belonged to everyday, ordinary citizens. They were the true power of a nation.
This brings us to one of the most famous things Rousseau ever wrote. Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. And this brilliantly illustrates how Rousseau viewed strict, absolute governments. He saw them as entirely unnatural prisons. Humans are born completely free in nature, right? But the absolute monarchy forces them into invisible societal chains that dictate exactly where they work, what they pay, and how they live. He wanted to break those chains for good.
So what does this all mean, and why was this idea so incredibly dangerous to King Louis XVI? Well, because Rousseau's concept gave citizens the ultimate logical justification to take their power back. Think about it. If sovereignty rightfully belongs to the people, and a king is treating his people badly, say by letting them literally starve in the streets while he throws lavish parties, the citizens have every right to rebel and change the government. They aren't committing a sin, they're just taking back what is already theirs. In one brilliant philosophical move, Rousseau completely destroyed the safety net of divine right.
Section 4. Diderot, the skeptical rebel. Denis Diderot. Our second hacker was Denis Diderot. He's famous for editing the world's first massive encyclopedia, which was this huge collection of books aimed at putting all human knowledge in one place using logic and science, while boldly, and I mean boldly, ignoring traditional church teachings. His primary weapon was something called total skepticism. Skepticism means refusing to believe something is true just because an authority figure, like a really powerful priest or king, tells you it's true. Diderot's ultimate goal was to train ordinary people to question absolutely everything around them, demanding actual proof and logic instead of just blind faith.
And he held some incredibly extreme, aggressive views to match that deep skepticism. Just listen to this famous declaration. Humans will only be truly free when the last king is strangled using the body parts of the last priest. Now that is a highly shocking and honestly violent statement, especially for the time. But it perfectly captures his raw, unedited desire to violently uproot both the political power of the crown and the religious power of the Catholic Church at the exact same time. He viewed both of these institutions as the ultimate oppressors of the human mind.
So why was this specific brand of total skepticism so dangerous? Well, think about how the system actually operated. The entire French political structure ran on a foundation of fear. The public obeyed the king and the church because they were absolutely terrified not to. They feared execution in this life and damnation in the next. By teaching people to be skeptical and to demand actual evidence, Diderot was systematically dismantling the mental control and the deep-seated fear that the authorities heavily relied upon to keep millions of peasants quietly in line.
Section 5. Paine mocking the elite. Tom Paine.
Finally, we meet our third hacker, the radical, English-born Tom Paine. He wrote in a highly direct, straight-talking style that everyday people could actually read and easily understand. Paine's specific target was the whole concept of a hereditary ruler. This is a system where supreme power automatically passes from a father to his son, completely regardless of his actual talent or character. Paine wanted to highlight to the masses just how ridiculous it is to assume that unearned, inherited power somehow makes you qualified to lead an entire country.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Paine logically broke down the monarchy to show just how mathematically and socially ridiculous it actually was. He used a brilliant, funny analogy to drive his point home. He basically said, look, you would never assume a mathematician's son automatically inherits the ability to solve complex equations. That would be crazy, right? So why on earth would we assume a king's son automatically inherits the ability to wisely rule a nation? It completely defies common sense. Furthermore, he argued that living a life of total luxury at the massive palace of Versailles put the king in a clueless, royal bubble. It isolated him completely, making the king utterly oblivious to the real, everyday struggles of his starving, hardworking subjects.
So why was this simple, straight-talking logic such an enormous threat? Because Paine didn't just challenge the king academically, he made the king look completely foolish. He used humor and basic common sense as a literal weapon. Because when people stop fearing a king and start laughing at his incompetence instead, the monarchy totally loses its aura of authority. Paine essentially stripped away the intimidating mystique of the crown and gave everyday people the vocabulary to openly mock and dismiss the ruling elite.
Section 6. The mindset for revolution, crashing the system.
We've seen how Rousseau gave the people the right to rebel, how Diderot broke their fear of authority, and how Paine taught them to laugh at the absurdity of the crown. Collectively, these three hackers successfully crashed the old operating system of France. For all my Year 9 historians out there watching, this table is your ultimate revision screenshot. This beautifully summarizes exactly how logic, reason, and science dismantled the king's absolute monarchy. Let's recap. Rousseau taught that sovereignty belongs to the people, providing the moral justification to rebel. Diderot preached total skepticism, which dismantled the mental control and fear of the church. And Tom Paine aggressively mocked hereditary rule, making the king look completely foolish and unfit to lead.
The French Revolution was, as you'll learn, an incredibly violent historical event, but the fuse was lit entirely in the minds of the people first, decades before any physical walls were ever torn down. And it leaves us with a fascinating, profound thought to end our explainer today. Are ideas actually the most dangerous weapons of all, and could modern political or social systems still be hacked by revolutionary thinkers and writers today? Think about that as you continue studying this incredible period of history. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning everything.